missions in the Amazon. When people had wounds, they would actually take an ant and encourage the ant to bite because the mandibles of the ant head acted like staples and it would close the wound and scar tissue would grow around the head of the ant, and then the ant's head would be like a lattice work for cells to grow, and eventually the ant's head would disintegrate and the wound would be healed. Now, it wasn't talking about in the same location, but the principle of using an ant's head to encourage healing, it was practiced by other cultures ad hayom hazeh. I found that pretty interesting because when I read that Gemara, I thought it was bizarre. Yeah. That's right. Ein davar chadash tachas hashemayim. Okay. So we'll start on the bottom. All right, we got to do we have to acknowledge our sponsors. We gratefully acknowledge the generosity of our many sponsors. A Year of Learning, Sue and Arnie Gerlich, memory of Malka Perlman and Philip Mann, Yisrael David Ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Beryl Ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch. You see an empty Gemara around. There's one on the table behind me. Yosef Ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Hannah Rivka Bas Rav Pearl Rasner Bas Rav Tzvi Hirsch, Arav Tzvi Hirsch Ben Shlomo Yaakov Sarah Bas Ephraim Yisrael Dov Ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim Ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Adidya Bas Rav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam Bas Rav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel Bas Rav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom Ben Rav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom Shloima Yaakov Ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, and Shmuel Ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch. Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of Toby Perez, Sarah Tova Bas Yisrael Dov, Charlie Galvinstein and Sam Levine, for Ramona Levine, Rachel Mata Bas Ravasher. Friends of Nina Moinister, Nechama Asna Bas Yitzkarin. Friends of Steve Vigder, Simcha Melech Ben Meir Lev Halevi. Friends of Marcy Kurtz in memory of her great niece, Leah Bracha. Month of Learning, David and Mindy Cheslow in memory of his father, Moshe ben Reuven Mordechai. Susan and Reuven Zev Podolsky in memory of her father, Simcha Bunim ben Yeshua, and her mother, Chaya Bas Rav Avram Dov. Haran and Mel Haller in memory of her father, Yosef Elazar ben Tzvi Hirsch. Beatrice Pizer in memory of her father, Yisachar Dov ben Shmuel. Stanley Presser in memory of his wife, Chaya Leah Bas Zev HaKohen. And the children and grandchildren honoring living grandparents, Vicky and Larry Fish. Week of Learning, Judy and Michael Peretsky in memory of her mother. Today is the 24th. Linda Suss in memory of a day of learning Torah Fund. Linda Suss, Baruch Meir Ben Rav Ezra. Okay, we'll start toward the bottom of Ayin Zion Amid Beis. About 4 lines from the bottom. Okay. Where Reb Shimon had made the comment, he added the words loy ki. We did that yesterday. All right, so let's go a little beyond that. Tana Rabbanan. The rabbis teach in a brisa. Okay, banim. That the pasuk referring to Egyptian converts uses the word banim. Okay, below banos, so that would exclude the women. According to this view, the women can marry in immediately. Okay, Dibri Reb Shimon, that was the opinion of Reb Shimon. Omer Reb Yehuda says, yeah, but if you keep reading the pasuk, it says, Hari hu Omer Bonum asher yevoldu lahem dor shlishi. Sons that are born to them. It didn't say just bonum ledor shlishi, descendants up to the third generation. It adds the words asher yevoldu. Okay, Hakasav Tala'an Beleda. So the pasuk says that the determining factor is people who get born, and therefore the women are the ones that do the bearing, so they're included also. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Elavda Amar Rabbi Yehuda Kasav Talan Beleda. If Rabbi Yehuda had not pointed out that the pasuk makes birth the determining factor. Lo matzah v'ragla v'beis medrash. Literally, he wouldn't have had his feet or his legs, his feet or his hands in the base medrash. But what it means is he wouldn't be able to upslug him. Okay? Kavan, because the Amar Mar, what Rabbi Yehuda said was Kahal Gerim Ikre Kahal. That elsewhere when we refer to Gerim, we use the word Kahal. And when we refer to kosher Yidden, so to speak, we use the word Kahal. So converts are perfectly kosher Jews with the various exceptions of Moabites, Ammonites, Midianites, and Egyptians. What? Okay, and Canaanites, which we'll learn in the epistle. What?
I said Masonite, but that's different.
Okay. Okay. Top of the page, Ayin Ches. We'll deal with Masonite later. Okay, we'll turn off our phones to learn about Masonite. Mitzri Sheni Mai Yitaher. So the Gemara says, what is the mechanism by which a second generation Egyptian is no longer Tameh, he's only Puzzle. I'm using the Tuma Tahira Lashon because when you get Tuma and Tahira, as you go down in levels of Tuma, the level before Tahar is Puzzle, which means it cannot transmit. So when he says Mitzri Sheni Maya Tahir, how do you take away the, and he's being metaphorical here, the tuma from a second generation Egyptian, so that the third generation Egyptians have no marriage restrictions. So that, in other words, he's saying it doesn't really make sense. All of a sudden they're tahar. So he comes up with an alternate explanation. Dilma I over v'nisasif. Maybe what we're talking about is an Egyptian who wasn't allowed to marry a born Jewess, but he did anyway. And her kid is perfectly kosher. Maybe that's what he's talking about. So the pasuk says, "De'i lo kosiv kra." The Torah would not base a halachic concept on somebody doing something wrong. That doesn't make sense. So the Torah says, really? Hare mamzer te'i v'ksiva kra. Mamzerim are an iffy, in quotes, situation. Schwartz was fooling around with Mrs. Abramowitz and they produced the kid. It's a mamzer. That is certainly not normative behavior, and yet there's a whole body of Torah in the Torah itself. So the Gemara says the Isuraksav, that iffy situation is talking about where the result becomes a prohibition. Here, if we get the Egyptian marrying a Jewish girl, the result becomes a permission. The kid can marry in, so that doesn't make sense. If you talk about where it leads to a prohibition, the Torah is not going to create a situation where doing something wrong leads to a benefit. Hare mamzer gerushasai. But what about, here's a new case. Mr. and Mrs. Schwartz aren't getting along, they get a divorce. Now it happens, and it's not so infrequent, that they realize they can't live without each other and they remarry. That's fine and dandy. But Mr. and Mrs. Schwartz gets a divorce, and then he marries and Mrs. Schwartz then marries Mr. Cohen, and he can't marry Mr. Cohen, whatever his name is. And then they get divorced. She's hard to live with. And Schwartz comes back and say, "Oh, you're free, marry me again." Now, if that happens and they produce children, that kid is a mamzer. Okay, she was a mamzer too. That's why she had all the divorces. But the kid is mamish a mamzer. Okay, so that, and there the okay. So here's a case where it would be a hetera, and the footnote explains that there she's rejected, blah blah blah. So you can look at footnote number 7 with regard to that. So the Gemara says, Hasam, in that case, Mishum Ikari Surahu de Ksave, that over there, the Pasuk had to explain that case, not because it comes out to a possible benefit, but because the Torah had explicitly say Schwartz can't remarry his wife if there was another husband in the interim. Okay, that's the end of that. Now we're going back to Egyptian converts again. Tana Rabbanan, the pasuk says, "Im nemar banim." If the Torah, as I tried to show a minute ago, you could have left out banim, and you could have said anybody born to an Egyptian family till the 3rd generation, or you could have left out born to. You could have said children of Egyptian marriages until the 3rd generation. You don't need both terms. Im nemar banim, lama nemar dairas. If it says banim, why does the pasuk else have to go on to say until the 3rd generation? It uses the word dairas. The imnem are dairas, and if you're going to pasuk mentions dairas, lama nemar banim. Why does it need banim? Something is superfluous here. So the Gemara, the Brisa answers, Im nemer banin, lom nemer dairas. If the pasuk left out the word dairas and only mentioned banim, Hi si Omar ben Rishon v'sheni Asur. I would have said the first. I could have made the following argument. This is cute. If it says you may not chill up till the 3rd son cannot be part of the marry into the Jewish community, I would have said that a fecund Egyptian couple, their first son can't marry in, their second son can't marry in, but their 3rd son could marry in. Shlishi mutter, the 3rd son would be fine. Lakach nemer dairo. So the pasuk to tell it to not permit that misunderstanding adds the word generation until the 3rd generation. Okay. Yeah. People have a misconception. People say a Moabite woman can become Jewish, but a Moabite man cannot. That's not true. What is true is that a Moabite woman, if she converts 3 months later, she can marry anybody she wants. A Moabite man who converts can only marry a Nesina, a mamzeres, a freed slave, or another convert. But they're perfectly comfortably joining the Jewish community. They just can't marry into the kahal. That's what the pasuk says. People misunderstand that meaning. So with regard to Egyptians, the 1st generation has this marital restriction. The second generation also has a marital restriction. The third generation is kosher legamri and can marry anybody they want. Even a bas Israel can marry a kohen. Okay, so so therefore shlishli mutter, but the third son. Maybe you'd say lekach nemer dairos. No, the pasuk uses the word dairos. So let's leave out the word banim. Nemer dairos v'lo nemer banim. Haisa Aimer, I might have restated. I might have misunderstood. God is talking to Har Sinai. We just came out of Egypt just a few days ago, right? 49 days ago, we crossed the sea, or 44 days ago, we crossed the sea. There was an Eruv Rav. There were a bunch of not necessarily Jewish people that are impressed by what was going on and joined in. Maybe God at Har Sinai said, a Jewish person, one of the 12 Shvatim people, cannot marry into the Eruv Rav for 3 generations. But after that, it's okay. If I left out Banim, I might have interpreted you here at Har Sinai are restricted for 3 generations of marrying into the Eruv Rav.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
When you say third generation, it means the third born man, or the
yes,
born to the third?
No, third born.
Third born.
Okay. Mr. Egypt becomes Jewish. Mr. and Mrs. Egypt both convert, right? They marry each other again because they're not coming. Their children are generation 2. They have marital restrictions. Their grandchildren are generation 3. They can marry anybody. They're all okay, but there are marital restrictions. Okay. Maybe all these restrictions only apply to people who were present at Har Sinai. Therefore, nemer banim, it says sons, that it goes on forever to everybody. Now the pasuk has another word, lohem, to them. Okay, mayhem and maneh. That means count from them. This is the answer to your question, Zev. That okay, and lahem means halach achar psulim. That we look at the one that has the psul. Okay, so we'll figure what that out means in a minute. The itzrich lemiktav lahem. We needed this word lahem. The itzrich lemiktav asher yevoldu. We also needed the pas with you think lochem means, well, to them that's who you have to look at, but we also need that we're born, because we need both loshinas. The ikas rachmana asher yevaldu, it only said that are born to them. Hava amina me b'neihem, that we only count boys. Kasav Rahman Elohim, no, we count everybody. The Ikasav Rahman Elohim, if we said to them only and left out the words, the word we're born, Hava Amina Mitzris Hamuberes Sheniskaira. What about an Egyptian lady who's already pregnant? And she decides to become Jewish, and she completes the conversion process while she's still pregnant. Okay? So what about her baby? Is her baby, since the baby is in her when she converts, do we say that in that baby's case, it would have to go to its grandchild? Or do we say, so in other words, the baby's on the same level as the mother? Or do we say that once the baby's born, that's already the second generation from Egypt? So the word, the Kasav Rachmana Asher Yavaldu, that it was born, even if the kid is born 17 seconds After she comes out of the mikveh, the kid is already second generation. Kosav Rachmana Asher Yivaldu. Okay. The Itzrich, we had to say the Michtav Lahem Hachav. We had to have that word Lachem in this pasuk. The Itzrich Lemiktav Loi. We also had to have the word for him, Gabe Mamzer. And another, we're now making an analogy between Mamzerim and Egyptians. So we needed the word Lachem in the Egypt Parsha, and we need the word Lo, born to him, in the Mamzer Parsha. The Ikas of Rachmana Hacha, if it only had over here by Egypt, Mishum, Deba, Metipa Psula. The reason that there's a quote blemish, meaning the marital restriction, on Egyptian converts is because, and the Gemara uses the word, their semen is tainted. When that child was born, it was not Jewish. So that person was born from, quote, tainted semen. But a mamzer is born from kosher semen. It's just in the wrong place. Okay? Mishum dekov metifa psula, the Egyptian. Avol mamzer, deba metifa kshera, who comes from kosher semen, amalo. I would have said maybe, without further explication, I would have said maybe mamzerim can marry anybody they want. The ikas of Rav Chana Gabi Mamzer, if the pasuk only restricted with regard to mamzerim, mishun de ein roy leboba kahali olam. I would say the problem with mamzerim is it's a permanent taint that affixes to all their descendants forever and ever. But Egyptians, the taint comes away after 3 generations of halacha. Amalo, we do not say they are restricted because the pasuk says it's only 3 generations. So we need both psukim to have the word lo in one case and lachem in the other. Okay, another issue. What happens? We said that let's call them the A's. Mr. A, Mr. Egyptian A, marries Mrs. Egyptian B. They produce children, Egyptian B. Egyptian B has restrictions. He marries another Bas Egyptian. He marries a girl, Egyptian B. They produce a kid who's Egyptian C, who can marry anybody. But what happens if Mr. B marries the youngest daughter of an A? I mean, marries an A girl, another young woman who converts. So now it's a mixed marriage. It's an A, B. What? We'll see. Well, the word Yolda seems to indicate it goes after the mother, but we'll see. So what happens if a male second generation Egyptian marries a female first generation Egyptian? Mitzri Sheni Shenasa Mitzri Srishayna. Bana Shlishi Dahave. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the child, you're right, is classified as a C because Tati was a B. So the Gemara says, Alma, Kesavar Basar Didei Shadainan Le. So maybe we could determine from this that we always follow the father in terms of what a child is. Mesi for Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef says that's wrong. Rabbi Tarfon Aimer, because there's a Mishnah in which it states, Rabbi Tarfon Aimer, Yechaylim Mamzerim Lit Yatahir. There is a way for a mamzer to erase, who has the blemish forever, there is a way he can erase his mamzer blemish. and make his offspring or his his descendants non-mamzerim. Kate said, how does he do it? Mamzer nasa shifcha. A mamzer marries a shifcha who was not freed. Okay, now a Jew is not allowed to marry a shifcha, but there's an exception a mamzer is. Okay, now Havlad Evet. Since the shifcha is a slave, she's your slave. The kid born to her is also your slave. So now, Shechararu, he frees the baby. You're not my slave anymore. Okay. V'nimtza ben Charin, the kid's a perfectly free, now a free Jew who has no blemish of mamzerus. So this is a raya that we follow the mother. Because Tati's a mamzer, the kid should be a mamzer. But mommy is a shifcha, so the kid's a slave. It's not a mamzer. And once it's freed, it's a kosher yid. So any of us who are mamzerim, this is an out for our descendants. Okay? Alma basar dida shadinan lay. So obviously, this is a raya that we don't follow the father, we follow the mother. Shiny Hassam, that's different. Because there's an explicit pasuk that says slaves go after their, okay, that the Omar Kra, the pasuk explicitly says, Ha'isha v'lodeha tihiyeh la'adoneha. The slave woman and any offspring she may have belong to the master. So the Gemara at this point is saying that the general rule of following the father does not apply. Obviously, if there's a specific pasuk that says it doesn't apply. So Mesi for Rava says, I don't like that. Omer Reb Yehuda. Now we had him before. Minyamin Ger Mitzri, an Egyptian guy who converted at the time of Rabbi Akiva. Hoyali Chaver, he was my chavrusa. The Talmudei Rabbi Akiva in Rabbi Akiva's yeshiva. The Aimar, and he made this statement. We had this exact memory before. Ani Mitzri Rishon, I'm a first generation Egyptian. Sasi Mitzris Rishona, I'm going to marry a first generation Egyptian girl who converts. I met her at the yeshiva dance. The Ase Libni Mitzri Shnia, and then we'll be careful to marry our sons to second generation Egyptian girls, Jewish Egyptian girls. Kidei Sheyehe ben b'ni Rui Bakahal, so that my grandson can marry your granddaughter. The Esau Kedaitach Basre di de Shadin lay. If you say that the boy that's born to this Minyamin's family goes after the father, Afili Rishananami. So let his son marry a first generation Egyptian woman. He doesn't want to do that because if he marries a first generation Egyptian woman, the baby would be second generation and we'd have to wait till a great-grandson to marry into the kahal. So that's okay. Afilu Rishoninami. So we're going to knock out that challenge. Ha'omar le Rav Yochanan Latana. When Rav Yochanan quoted this brisa, Tane Rishona, he said, change the wording a little bit. Tane Rishona, say Minyamin says, I will marry a first generation Egyptian lady to my second generation Egyptian son. so that my grandson can enter the kahal. Okay, so in other words, it sticks with the father. Kiyasa Reb Dimi Omer Reb Yochanan, when Reb Dimi came from Eretz Israel to Babel, he quoted Reb Yochanan as saying, Mitzri Sheni Shanasa Mitzri Rishayna, if a second generation Egyptian man marries a first generation Egyptian woman, their offspring, Bena Sheni Havya, their child becomes a second. So now Rabbi Yochanan clearly is saying we follow the mother. Okay? Alma, Basar, Ime, Shadin and Lay. We complain. It's absolutely clear from this memra that we follow the mother. Challenge that. Amar Le'abaya. Abaya says, Ella ha da Amar Rabbi Yochanan. But what about another thing Rabbi Yochanan said? All right, this will be better understood with some background. If you have two animals, you live far from Jerusalem, and you're going to bring a carbon, but you're not so confident that this long hike to Jerusalem that the animals are going to arrive in good health. So you get yourself an insurance policy. You bring two animals. No, we'll get to the pregnant one. But first we're dealing with two. You take two animals and you say each is an achrayas on the other. So if I get there and only one is alive, that's going to be my korban. If I get there and they're both alive, I get to pick the one I want. The other one pastures till it gets a mum. It gets sold, and the money is used for a ola. So that's called an achrayas. Okay, so now, based on that understanding, we're going to have an issue. Ella Hoda Amar Reb Yochanan. How about this memra from Reb Yochanan? Hifrish chatas mu'uberes v'yolda. You sanctify a pregnant animal to be a korban. And between now and when you go to Yerushalayim, she gives birth. Okay? So, Ratza miskaperes ba. If you choose, you could shecht her and she could be your chatas. Or if you prefer, Rotza mischaper bevlada. If you prefer, as long as it's 8 days old, you could sacrifice the baby. And whichever one is still alive, you send to pasture till it gets a mum, etc. Okay, so now we're going to throw into the mix. What is the status of a fetus? The halacha has two possible views. One is yerech imo, literally the thigh of the mother. In other words, until it's born, it's considered part of the mother. Just like her kishkas are part of her, and her heart, her lung, the baby's part of her. The other is no, it's an independent entity, just happens to be living inside the mother nowadays. Later, maybe it'll move in a few months. Okay.
When the lease is up.
When the lease is up. If you say the baby is an independent entity, so havile kemafrish de chatais la'achrayas. So that would be the identical case as bringing two animals to Jerusalem. One is just carrying the other. Ella, however, okay. The Omer Rav Ushia and Rav Yusha explains Hefresh Dei Chatais La'acharayas, which we explained, Mechaperes Biachas Mehem, Vahashnia Tira, the other one goes out to pasture. So that would be fine if you say the baby is an independent entity. Ella I Amrat Uber Yerech Imahu. But if you say the baby is considered part of the mother, Havale Vlad Chatos, then it's considered the offspring of a chattis. If a chattis gets pregnant after it's designated, the halach is different. It's the offspring, and you shech the mother as a chattis, and you lock the baby in a barn and you let it die from starvation. That's the din. So what about you had your choice with the two animals? Ishtik. Rav Dimi couldn't answer that. He had no response. Amalei Abaya, who asked the question, tries to get Rav Dimi off the hook. Dilma Shani Hassam, maybe it's a different case there. Maybe the rule's a little different. Iksiv, Asher Yevoldu. With regard to our Egyptians, children who are born to the third generation may marry anybody. Haksiv Toloi Beleda. So the pasuk makes the birth the determining factor, and maybe we can thus understand the pregnant sheep. So Amalei Ripdimi says, Kafna, meaning brilliant one. I saw your head between the pillars. In other words, you were sitting up front and center in the yeshiva when Rabbi Yochanan Kiyas Omer Rabbi Yochanan Laha Shemaita, and you now explained what Rabbi Yochanan had to say. Now the Gemara is going back and going into the issue of what is the status of a baby prior to its birth, both with people and with animals. The reason the pasuk says when it's born it goes after the mother is because it says it goes after the mother in the pasuk. So that would imply that that in a normal case, the person's yichus comes from the tati. Ella ha da omarava. But what about the following issue? Nachris meuberes sheneskaira. A pregnant woman converts to Judaism. Bana ein tzorech tvila. When the baby is born, it does not need to be immersed in a mikveh. Amai ein tzorech tvila. Why do we say the baby doesn't require tefillah? If you tell it, it's because of Rabbi Yitzchak's memra, the Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Dvar Torah, as far as the Torah is concerned. I have to interrupt myself again. If a woman goes to the mikveh in like a muumuu, a very loose garment, and she's not worried about it touching her body, that's a kosher tefillah. In Long Beach once, the mikveh was broken. It was a 3-day stretch, and my wife actually wore a loose garment and toveled in the ocean. So that's permissible. The Omer of Yitzchak, Davar Torah, Rabu Makpid Alav Chaytzes. If most of her body is covered, and she's makpid, in other words, she doesn't want to have this garment on, then it's a chatzitza, okay? Rubu she'enu makpid alav enu chaytzes. But if she doesn't care that the garment gets wet, that it's touching her, she just wiggles around so that water gets under it, and it's not a problem. So maybe we're going to say that since the baby is perfectly happy to be inside the womb, the mother is not a chatzitza, and the baby was toivel. So the problem with that is ha'amar of kahana lo shana el rubo. That's talking about where much of her body is covered. Aval kulon chaytzes. But if you're in a bubble and you're completely blocked from the water, that is a chatzitza, even if you don't care. Okay, so and the baby is completely blocked by the entity of the mother around it. Shiny over, maybe a baby's different. Tahainu debise. because that's how babies develop. In other words, vis-a-vis the baby, the mother is just a support system, and it's not a chatzitza. All right, another possibility. Kiyasa Ravina Omar Rav Yochanan. Ravina quotes Rav Yochanan, but umos holech acher hazocher. When it comes to nationality, we follow the father. Okay, Nisgairu, when they convert to Judaism, holech acher pogum shebishnehem. We go with one that has the worst blemish. What we're talking about here is when the Jews went into Canaan, there was a rule: kill the Canaanites. Now, what happens if a Canaanite has got a mixed marriage with a Persian? So if the mother is Persian, and they all live in Canaan, and now we're going to either kill them or not. So if the mother is Persian and the father is a Canaanite, we follow that the baby's a Canaanite. If the mother is a Canaanite and the father is a Persian, we go after the fact that the baby is a Persian and we don't kill him. And trying to apply that to more modern situations, we say we look at the couple and we take which one of them has, quote, the bigger blemish, unquote. So in that case, the one, okay. So, but almost hazoker, when it comes to nationality, we follow the male kedisanya. Minayin la echad min ha'umos. What happens when a man from the non-Canaanite nation, Shabol al-Canainis v'hulad ben, who marries a Canaanite woman and they have a baby, Sha'ata rashai liknaiso be'eved. You would be allowed to buy that baby and make it a slave. Okay? Because we follow the father, it's a Persian kid, and a Persian can be a Jewish slave. We call it an Evan Kanaini, but really the real genuine Kanaini had to be killed. They couldn't be slaves. Shenemar, because the pasuk says, V'gam mibnei ha-teshavim, the people who moved into Canaan, Hagorim imochem mehem tiknu, that you are allowed to purchase the offspring of immigrants to Canaan. Yachal afilu echad min haKanainim. It might be that even if one parent is Canaanite, Shabal achas min ha'umos, but it's the male and he marries the outsider, Haili Ben, and they have a kid, Sha'ata Rashai Liknoiso Levid, that we would be able to buy this slave, this child who is a descendant of a Canaanite man. Talmud Loimar, Pasuk explains you can't. Asher holido v'artzechem, that is born from those who were begotten, who were conceived in your land. Min ha-noladim mi'artzechem, from those conceived in your land, but not Canaanites, that you can v'lo min ha-garim bi'artzechem, and also not from people born outside of Canaan to Canaanite fathers who returned to Canaan. They would also have to be killed. They wouldn't be able to be bought. Okay. Niskairu holech achar pegum shevishnehem. Ravina made a statement. We go after the more problematic of the parents. Okay? But what does that mean? Mitzri Shenasa Amonis. If you talk about a male Egyptian who marries a female Ammonite, my pagum shabishnehem is who's got the worst pagum? They're both the same. She has no problem whatsoever because she could marry anybody she wants, even a Jewish person. So how can you say the one who has the bigger pagam? He only one has a pagam. Amone velo amonis. We have the pasuk, and Amoni can't marry, but an Amonis can. So Ella, but Amoni shenasa mitzris. We're talking about a male Ammonite whose family whose children can never, sons, can never marry in, and an Egyptian girl whose grandchild can marry in. So, if the baby's a boy, Shaddai hu basar Amoni, we consider him an Ammonite because his father's an Ammonite. The inekeva have, but if they have a girl, Shadainu basar mitzris, we go after the mother who only has a 3-generation restriction. All right. Next Mishnah. Mamzerim v'nesinin asurin echad zecharim echad nekei of asirin asur olam. It's forever. And echad zecharim echad nekevas. Doesn't matter, boys or girls. Amarish lekesh. Mamzeris la'achar esra dairos muteris. Rish Lakesh comes up with a chiddush. The 10th generation of a mamzer can marry anybody he or she wants. Yalef esre esre asire the Amoni umoavi. And he makes a hekesh to the statement 10th generation. The Torah uses with reference to Ammon and Moab. Malahanan nekevas muteras. Just like with Ammon and Moab, women can marry anybody as soon as they convert. Avkam nekevas muteras. Here too, female mamzeros are okay after 10 generations. So, malahalan miyad. But over there, the Ammonite women can get married immediately. Afkan miyad, if you're going to make a hekesh to Ammon, so we should say that male mamzerim can never marry, but female mamzerim can. Ki ahani gezerah shava me esre ve'elach. So there's a concept. When you make a gezerah shava, is it a generality or does it pick up the specifics of the case you're learning from? So here he wants to say that since there is the mention of 10th by Ammon, we're going to say the 10th generation. We can't say it to the men, but we can for the women, because women are easier by Ammon. So we could say mamzerim, women are easier, and then we utilize the 10 to tell us when. Okay. V'hatanan, tanan mamzerim v'nesinin asurin v'asurin iser oilam. It's forever. Echad skarim v'echad nekevas. Doesn't matter, men or women. Lo kasha nish the problem. Ha kamanda amar dun mine umino. That's the concept that you derive and you take the specifics. Vaha manda omer dun mine ve'oike basra. And the other opinion is you do even with the gezerah shava, you look at it in its own terms and you don't pick up specifics. Shaila es Rebbe Eliezer. So they asked the Shaila by Rebbe Eliezer. Mamzeres le'achar asara dare mahu. What's the halacha? Rish Lakish says a mamzeres can get married after 10 generations. I met this girl. She's gorgeous. She's a mamzeres 10th generation. Can I marry her? So Rebbe Eliezer almost laughs him off. Omer lehem. Mi yitain li dor shlishi va'ataharenu. If you can find me even a third generation mamzer, I'll say you could marry her. Okay, you want to stop here? Everybody's filtering out. What time is it, Marty? All right, so we'll go a little bit further. Okay, I would matter her. Alma kasavar mamzera lochaye. So according to Rev Eliezer, mamzerim are incapable of reproducing. That's what it means, lochaye. They don't live long enough or or have the fertility to produce future daras. V'chein Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna said the same thing. Mamzera lochaye, mamzerim are incapable of reproducing. Vaha anantanan, but we have in our Mishnah, mamzerim asurim, va'asurin isur oilam. It's forever. So here, apparently, the Mishnah holds they can reproduce. Amar of Zera, here's the deal. Lididei mefarshali minei the Rev Yehuda. Rev Yehuda explained this apparent contradiction to me. Sometimes you know someone's a mamzer. Sometimes you don't know someone's a mamzer. Okay? Didier Chaye, a well-known mamzer. God knows his kids are going to be mamzerim. Everybody's going to know it. Nobody's going to marry his kids. So a well-known mamzer is capable of reproducing. The lo yediya lo chaye. But if the person's a mamzer and nobody knows it, Abramowitz was fooling around with Mrs. Schwartz. She had a baby. The Schwartz made the bris, doesn't know it's not his kid. In those cases, God handles it by preventing the kid from reproducing. Okay? The day below the day. But what about a case where it's a few people know about it, but most people don't? Then the baby could make a baby. But again, God handles it, so we don't introduce a chain of mamzerim into Yiddishkeit. Beyond that, grandchildren, they won't have kids. Now, again, a cute little story. The Rebbe Ami. There was a mamzer that nobody knew about in the Rav Ami's neighborhood. Achriz ale the mamzra. So Rav Ami put up signs, bought commercials. Yitzi is a mamzer. Okay? So have a bachi va'azil. The mamzer gets very upset. He's sobbing. He's crying. How could you out me? I was in the closet as a mamzer and you outed me. Amrlei chayim nasati lo. I did you a humongous favor. If I hadn't outed you, you'd have died at 15. You wouldn't have gotten married. You wouldn't have kids. By outing you, you can live a long, healthy life. Okay. What?
Okay.
Okay. Amar Rav Huna bar Ada Nesinim David Geyser Aleichem. The Gemara has this here. Nesinim were the Gebirim that fooled Yehoshua into letting them convert. And there's a question if since they converted because they didn't want to be killed, they obviously aren't Lishma converts, and maybe they're really not Jewish. Now, the Gemara earlier had said that Midiraisa in Yehoshua, it says you're not allowed to marry a Nasim. Here we're learning David made it to Kana. The Rishonim raised this issue, but we'll just go weiter. Amar Rav Huna bar Ada Nesinim David Geyser Aleihem. David made a gezerah regarding the Nesinim. Shenemar Vayikra Hamelech leGevonim ve'Amar Aleihem. The king called out the Gevonim and said to them, Hagivonim lo mibnei Yisrael etc. The Gebonim are not really part of the Jewish people and not allowed to marry other people who are Jewish. My time agozer aleihim. Why did David make this gezerah? The pasuk teaches us. Yehi Rav b'mei David shalosh shanim shana acharei v'shana. There was a famine for 3 years, year after year after year. There was a relentless famine. Shana Rishana Amar Lahem.
Even though they converted, they're not allowed.
Well, their ancestors converted, but maybe not legitimately. Okay, and they are a caste. The reason they're called Nesinim is because they were woodcutters and water haulers. So they were like the lowest caste in India. Everybody knew who they were because they had this hereditary lousy job. They were the garbage men of their time. And nobody is allowed to marry them, but they can marry each other, or they can marry converts or mamzerim. I mean, they have a pool of candidates. In any event, Shana Rishina, the first year of the famine, Amar Lahem Shema Avdei Avodas Kachavim Yesh Bachem. Maybe God made this famine because there are crypto idolaters among us, and God is punishing us because of the hidden idolatry. Diksiv va'avartem Elohim acherim. They worshipped false gods, v'yishtachavisem lahem, and they bowed down to them. V'tzar es hashamayim v'lo yemotor, and God was pissed off and closed up heaven, and there was no rain. So batku v'lo matzu. So God sent out the religious secret police, and they checked everybody's closets, and nobody had a vessel in their closet. So David didn't have a rationale. Shnia Omer Lahem Shema Ovre Aveira Yesh Behem. Maybe people are sleeping around, and all of this nus is the reason it doesn't rain. Dixit. The no revivim malachish that love hoya, that God held back the raindrops, and the second rain didn't come that rainy season. Amatzach isha zona hoya loch, and the people were flaunting their immorality. This was David's supposition.
Oh, it's Saul's fault.
What?
It's all Saul's fault.
Yeah, that didn't work either. But kubala matzun. Everybody was in bed with their own wives when the secret police checked the windows. Okay? Shlishi somer lehem shema paskud staka v'rabim v'yesh bachem ein nosnin. So the third year, he says, you know what? Maybe by the Yom Kippur pledge, Abramowitz says, I'll give $500. And he never got around to writing the check. So they again, Ksiv, the Nisim, Veruach, the Geshem, Ein Ish, Machalola, B'matas Sheker. The pasuk says the clouds and the winds came, but the rain didn't, because men praise themselves by making promises that they don't keep. They give money that they don't give. So Batku v'lo matzu. They checked with the shul treasurers, and everybody was up to date with his dues and his pledges. So then Amar David says, Ein hadavar tolei elabi. It's got to be my fault, David said. I must have done something wrong. Obikesh David as Penei Hashem. God asked, David asked God, what did I do wrong? Omer Reish Lakesh, Reglatius says, Shesha'al B'Urim V'Tumim. What David did was he went to the Kohen Gadol and he asked the Urim V'Tumim, my mashma, how does he figure that out? Omer Rebbe Lezer, Asya Pnei Pnei. We make a Gezerah Shava, the word Pnei. Ksiv hacha ubikesh David es Pnei Hashem. He asked Pnei God. Ksiv hasam, it says over there, v'sho'el lo b'mishpat ha'urim lifnei Hashem. So the word Pnei is referenced by the Urim v'Tumim. So with Pnei over here, Reish Lakish sees that it was Urim v'Tumim. V'yomer Hashem el Shaul, v'al beis hadamim, v'al asher hemis es ha'gevaynim. So this pasuk seems to say that this famine was Shaul's fault because of the house of blood, because Shaul killed the Gevaynim. Now, if you go through all of the historical chapters in Nevi'im, never does it say Shaul killed any Gevaynim. But it does say, Al Shaul Shalo Nisped B'Halacha. Okay, I'm sorry. So what this pasuk interprets is Al Shaul, because of Shaul, the famine came. Now he's dead. Shalom Nisped B'Halacha. They didn't make a proper hesped. They didn't show him proper respect when he was dead. Okay? The Albeis Hadamim, because of the house of blood, Al Asher Himes Es HaGevaynim. That is a hint that Shaul killed the Gevaynim. The He Heichen Matzinu V'Shaul Shehemis Gevaynim. Show me anywhere where there's any reference to Shaul killing Gevaynim. It doesn't appear. Ella Mitoch Shaharag Nov Ira Kahanim. No, it was indirect. Shaul destroyed the city of Nod, which was a city of Kahanim that didn't show him adequate respect. Shoho maspikin lehem mayim mimazon. And the Kahanim in that town took care of the physical needs of the Gevaynim. So Mala Lavakasav Ke'ilu Hargan. So the pasuk tells us that since Shaul killed the support system for the Gevaynim, it's as if he had killed the Gevaynim himself. Okay, and we'll stop there and we'll pick up tomorrow with what was the problem at Shaul's funeral. Now, I apologize, it was a little iffy today because my chavrusa wasn't with me, so I didn't learn it as well as I might have.
Blame the chavrusa.
It's all Reuven's fault. It's always Reuven's fault.
Blame on Shaul.
It's all Shaul's fault. Okay, Bob, please take your
I will
phone.
take my phone. Will not be a phone
Okay. So now we know that hidden mamzerim, that God protects us from ourselves. But Basman Hazeh, with all the mixed marriages and all the non-kosher conversions, becomes issues.